Hi, welcome to our channel where we share the most intriguing stories. When I bought 3 acres of dusty Arizona land, I thought I was building a home. I didn't know I was stepping into a war. One woman, a power-hungry HOA president, would stop at nothing to take it from me, with lies, sabotage, and forged documents. But she messed with the wrong man. I never imagined that a patch of dry Arizona soil and a half-faded for sale sign would hit me like a second chance at life. But that is exactly what happened the day I first saw the 3 acres off a dusty county road just north of Scottsdale. After my marriage collapsed into a pile of paperwork and accusations, rebuilding felt like a distant fantasy. I'd spent the past few years living out of rentals and motel rooms, constantly on call for electrical jobs or small construction gigs, always telling myself I'd figure things out eventually. But eventually never comes unless you make it. So, when I signed the papers and became the owner of that land, it was like I finally had something solid under my feet again. Literally, the first thing that hooked me was the view. Standing at the highest point of the lot, I could see the rolling desert hills stretching out all the way to the horizon, dusty gold under the sun, saguaros standing like lonely guards. Coyotes yipped in the distance at night, and nothing blocked the sky. No barking neighbors, no street lamps that pretend they're the sun. Just silence, stars, and potential. I triple-checked the zoning, rural private use, no restrictions, definitely not part of the nearby HOA community called Sun Mesa Ridge. My lawyer confirmed it twice. I even had the county recorder laugh and say, if they ever try to drag you into that HOA circus, send them to me. I poured everything I had into the plans for a fresh start. A 1-story ranch-style house with a metal roof, a wide porch, a workshop for my tools, and a garage tall enough for the equipment I use on jobs. A place that wouldn't just be a house, but proof that I could build something that stays. The city planning office approved my blueprints without hassle. Permits stamped. Inspections passed. I could finally do what I do best: build. The first day of construction felt like Christmas morning for a man who no longer believes in magic. Big delivery trucks rolled in at sunrise. Workers unloaded concrete blocks and lumber. The rented generator buzzed to life, feeding power into the temporary panel. I walked the perimeter with my coffee, boots crunching in the gravel, already picturing where I'd put the grill, where I'd park my truck, where I'd sit on the porch and watch monsoon storms roll in. Day 2 started just as smoothly. The crew dug out the foundation trenches. The sun was warm but not brutal yet, and the whole property smelled like fresh-cut wood and diesel fuel. Then everything screeched to a halt. A shiny white SUV with the Sun Mesa Ridge logo pulled onto my driveway like it owned the place. Out stepped a woman who looked like she had ironed not only her clothes, but also her personality. Blonde bob cut to precision, perfectly white blouse with an embroidered HOA emblem, clipboard tucked like a weapon under her arm. She didn't introduce herself so much as announce herself. Chin high, voice sharp enough to cut drywall. I am Karen West, president of Sun Mesa Ridge Homeowners Association, she declared, as if saying her name should trigger applause. You are in violation of community standards. Construction must cease immediately until the architectural committee reviews your plans. I blinked at her. Then I laughed because it sounded like the start of a prank. This land isn't part of your community, I said, slow and friendly, like explaining math to someone's confused toddler. It's private land, no HOA here. She stared like I'd told her gravity stopped applying to her personally. Then she tapped her clipboard aggressively. All properties adjacent to Sun Mesa Ridge are subject to review for aesthetic compliance. Your materials are not approved, your equipment is unsightly, and your workers have not signed visitor agreements. You must file proper forms before continuing. I sighed. Ma'am, I have permits from the city. I am not bound to your HOA. You have no jurisdiction here. She tried a new tactic, the threatening whisper. We can involve the city. We can have this shut down. I already involved the city, I said, pointing at the official tags posted on the temp panel. They said I can build, and I will. Now please get off my property. Her face twisted into something between outrage and constipation. She promised she would be back with officials, jumped in her SUV, and tore off, leaving a dust cloud and a dozen confused construction workers staring after her. I shook my head, shrugged, and told everyone to get back to work. But I couldn't ignore the crawl of unease along my spine. I had just won the opening round of a fight I didn't sign up for, and if there is one thing I've learned about people like Karen, they don't back down, they escalate. 2 days. That's how long I got to enjoy peace after telling Karen to leave, just 2 days before the quiet rhythm of construction was interrupted by the first real hit. It started with a flicker. I was in the middle of measuring the frame for my workshop door when the power to the concrete mixer sputtered, groaned, and died. I checked the generator first, thinking maybe it overheated. Nothing. Then I walked over to the temp panel and froze. The entire unit had been shut off and tagged. A bright orange sticker screamed, "Service terminated by utility authority." Except here's the thing. I wasn't even hooked up to the grid yet. I got on the phone with the utility company immediately. The woman on the line was polite but confused. "Sir, according to our records, a stop work order was issued due to a community violation notice submitted by your homeowners association. It says the build is non-compliant and under dispute." My voice was flat. "I don't have a homeowners association." Long pause. Then she said, "Oh, well, this notice came from Sun Mesa Ridge HOA, referencing parcel number." She read out my parcel. My actual private, not in their jurisdiction parcel. I thanked her, hung up, and stood there with the heat rising in my chest like a pressure cooker. I'd expected pushback, maybe some more visits from Karen, but this was sabotage. Submitting fake documents to a public utility company. That was a whole new level. We fired up the backup generator I kept in my truck. Thank God I'm not the kind of contractor who ever shows up unprepared, and got back to work. But that was the first sign that this was going to be more than just some entitled neighbor drama. Karen was playing dirty, and she was just getting started. The next morning, right as we started pouring the foundation footers, a car pulled up again. Not Karen this time. A city vehicle. A tall guy in a wrinkled blue shirt stepped out, badge clipped to his belt, holding a clipboard. "Noise complaint," he said simply. "Got a report of illegal construction noise at 7:15 a.m. I stared at him. "We started at 8. I've got time-stamped surveillance footage if you need it." He blinked. "Really?" I nodded, pulled out my phone, showed him the security feed I'd started logging after Karen's visit. He watched a few seconds, nodded slowly, and said, "Mind if I walk around?" I let him, mostly because I wanted him to see for himself how legitimate everything was. He inspected the site, checked the permits I had posted, and even complimented the quality of the trench work. "Honestly," he said, "this looks better than most sites I inspect. You're clean." I'll log the call, but there's no violation here. As he got back in his car, I asked, "Did the complaint list a name?" He hesitated. "Anonymous, but the number on the form traces back to Sun Mesa Ridge HOA." I just smiled and nodded. Not surprised. That afternoon, a second city official showed up, this time an inspector from the Environmental Management Office. "We received a report of chemical dumping," she said, tight-lipped and already holding a form. She was looking for oil leaks, hazardous waste, improper disposal of building materials. I gave her full access. She found nothing, not even an open paint can. Just lumber, tools, and a crew getting sick of being interrupted. She left with an apology and a copy of my permit, which I handed over gladly. As she pulled out, I caught her talking into her radio. False report again. Looks like more HOA harassment. By day's end, we'd had 3 different disruptions, all clearly coordinated. I told my crew to head home early, not because I was giving up, but because I needed time to think. I dug out every single document I'd saved when buying this land. Parcel maps, deed, zoning classification, recorded easements, or rather, the lack of them. Everything was clean, not even a shared driveway. Still, something wasn't adding up. Someone somehow was convincing city officials to treat this as HOA property. So, I drove to the Maricopa County Recorder's office the next morning and requested the parcel's full history, every filing, every claim, every plat overlay for the last 15 years. The clerk, a kind man named Daniel, took one look at the flagged record and whistled. "Wow, somebody filed a zoning overlay request on this parcel just last month." My eyebrows shot up. Filed by who? Sun Mesa Ridge HOA. I could feel the blood rushing in my ears. On what grounds? He tapped the screen and frowned. They referenced a provision for voluntary annexation through boundary adjustment, but there's no signed consent from the owner. Just a digital form. "Can I see it?" He printed it. At the bottom, in fake blocky signature font, was my name. A signature I never gave, on a document I never saw. "That's a felony," I said flatly, Daniel nodded slowly. I'd recommend talking to an attorney. No shit. By the end of the day, I had scanned copies of every fake filing, my actual deeds, zoning confirmations, and a full packet ready for my lawyer. I emailed him everything and made an appointment for the morning. On my way back, I passed the Sun Mesa Ridge sign and saw Karen out walking a little white dog, wearing a tracksuit and sunglasses the size of salad plates. She waved, the kind of wave that says, "I'm winning." I didn't wave back. Instead, I went home and started writing up a log of everything that had happened. Times, names, badge numbers, license plates. I knew this game. She was counting on me to react emotionally, to screw up or lash out. But I've done too many jobs on sites crawling with OSHA inspectors and city auditors. I know how to play by the book, and how to make that book hurt when it's thrown back. And I had a feeling she hadn't seen anything yet. By the time the weekend hit, I figured I had at least plugged the worst of the leaks. My lawyer was prepping a cease and desist letter to the HOA, and I'd filed a formal complaint about the forged zoning document with the county recorder's fraud division. I thought that maybe, just maybe, the storm had passed. But the thing about storms is, when they go quiet too fast, it usually means they're just gathering force. It started with garbage, literal garbage. Monday morning, I pulled up to the site at 6:45, coffee in one hand and my tool bag in the other. I nearly stepped into a pile of busted glass, food wrappers, and what looked like shredded HOA newsletters. There were 3 garbage bags torn open near the north fence line, and one of them had a moldy diaper inside. I don't even have kids. Neither did anyone on my crew. At first, I thought maybe coyotes dragged them over from somewhere, until I found a receipt among the trash from the Sun Mesa Ridge Clubhouse Cafe, dated the night before. That wasn't wildlife. That was targeted. I checked the perimeter and saw fresh tire tracks leading from the gravel access road straight up to the gate. No footprints, but my cameras had caught motion the night before. I hadn't reviewed the footage yet, assuming it was just wind or jackrabbits. That was on me. Then came the vandalism. Mid-morning, I was inspecting the framing when my site foreman, Luis, waved me over. One of our rented mini excavators had deep scratches along the operator's side panel. Not just random dings, deliberate gouges like someone took a key to it over and over. 2 tires on the rear axles were slashed. This was fine last night, Luis said, jaw tight. It was a rental worth $40 grand. I had insurance, sure, but that wasn't the point. Someone came onto my site and damaged equipment. That's not petty. That's a crime. We filed a report with the sheriff's office. Again. They sent out a deputy around 2 in the afternoon. Younger guy with mirrored sunglasses and a just happy to be here attitude. Got any footage? He asked. I pulled the feed from the workshop camera and skimmed through. Just after 2 a.m., headlights appeared briefly at the gate, then cut off. A dark figure walked up to the fence, then vanished out of frame for almost 10 minutes. When they reappeared, they were holding something, maybe a tire iron or crowbar, and walked back toward the road. Hard to ID, the deputy said with a shrug, but I'll write it up. Probably some kids. I leaned against the truck, arms crossed. These kids know how to file zoning overlays and forge signatures too. He laughed like I was joking. I wasn't. After he left, I called a security contractor and scheduled the installation of full perimeter cameras with night vision, motion tracking, and off-site backups. I was done playing nice. That evening, I checked the online neighborhood forum I'd heard about, a little HOA gossip nest called Sun Mesa Connect. I'd ignored it until then, but curiosity got the better of me. I made a dummy account and logged in. It was worse than I expected. Right there on the front page, a post titled "Unknown Male Building Unpermitted Structure" with a blurry, zoomed-in photo of me taken from the road, hammer in hand. The caption was wild. We have reason to believe a man claiming to be a contractor is building a facility without proper authorization. Several residents have raised concerns about the possibility of a storage hub, or worse, a criminal hideout. This could affect all our property values and the safety of our children. Contact the HOA office if you notice suspicious activity. Do not engage. The comments were even more unhinged. Someone suggested I was a prepper setting up a bunker. Another claimed they heard I had trucks coming in from Mexico. A third comment implied I was part of a drug ring. And there, right below them all, was a response from Karen West herself. The HOA is aware of the situation and is working with the proper authorities. We urge residents to remain calm and vigilant. Calm and vigilant. Right. Like a witch hunt in yoga pants. The next morning, another cop car showed up. This time, they claimed they had a tip about unregistered commercial vehicles on the premises. When I asked what that even meant, the officer looked genuinely embarrassed and said, "We got a call about several suspicious trucks entering the area daily." "They're construction vehicles," I snapped. "It's a construction site." He nodded. "I can see that. Just following up on the call, sir." I showed him the rental contracts, license plates, permits again. He left without incident, but it was clear what was happening. Karen and her flying monkeys were weaponizing the entire neighborhood. By now, my crew was starting to get spooked. I had to sit everyone down and assure them we were within our legal rights and that the harassment was being handled. I hated that they were getting caught in this mess. Most of them just wanted a paycheck and a clean job, not a small-town turf war. Later that night, I got a knock on the door. Not at the job site, at my rental home 20 minutes away. It was one of my subcontractors, Julio. He looked rattled, said he'd been followed after work by a gray SUV, same make and model as Karen's, all the way to the highway. When he pulled off at a gas station, the SUV parked across from him, waited until he left, then pulled in behind him again a mile later. He finally lost them in traffic. I didn't say it aloud, but I had a sinking feeling we were being watched on and off site. That's when I called my attorney and told him we needed to escalate, officially. He agreed and began drafting a temporary injunction to prevent the HOA or any of its officers from contacting me, interfering with the property, or initiating complaints without legal cause. I also contacted a private investigator. If they wanted to play games, I was going to put a spotlight on every rule they bent and every law they broke, starting with whatever documents they were using to justify their fake claims. The war wasn't over, but the ground was shifting. By Thursday morning, the job site looked more like a tactical base than a construction zone. Perimeter cameras were up, motion sensors active, and I had installed floodlights with high-angle coverage around the workshop. Everything was backed up to a secure cloud server. I even mounted a discreet trail cam in a cactus near the eastern fence line, just in case someone decided to take the scenic route onto my property. And I wasn't done. While the crew worked the frame and started prepping for the roof trusses, I drove down to the Maricopa County Zoning and Development Office. This time, I wanted physical copies, certified ones, of every single document ever filed related to my parcel. The clerk gave me a manila folder an inch thick, complete with date stamps, surveys, zoning history, and submitted changes. I flipped through every sheet at a nearby desk until I hit the jackpot, or rather, the landmine. Filed 3 weeks ago, in Karen West's name as acting agent of Sun Mesa Ridge HOA, was a zoning amendment request to reclassify my land as part of a shared buffer zone intended for architectural cohesion between communities. Sounded official. Looked legal, but it was neither. Attached to the request was an annexation consent form, signed by me, except it wasn't. The signature was blocky, printed off-center. The notary stamp was blurred, suspiciously generic. And the listed notary's name, a guy who had died in 2017. Yeah, I took the packet straight to my attorney. By noon, we had filed 2 motions, one to challenge and void the zoning amendment based on fraudulent documentation, and a second for a temporary restraining order against Sun Mesa Ridge HOA, naming Karen personally. We also submitted a formal complaint to the Arizona State Board of Notary Publics and attached the forged document as evidence. The goal wasn't just to defend, it was to go on the offensive. That night, Karen made her next move. At exactly 1:42 a.m., 2 men in reflective vests drove a black utility van up to the front gate, snipped the chain, rolled inside, and parked by the electrical panel. My workshop camera caught everything. One of them planted a big red sticker on the main panel, condemned, structure under investigation. Then they chained the gate shut again from the inside. What they didn't know was that the same camera caught a third person arriving shortly after in a separate vehicle. Karen herself, stepping out in jeans and a windbreaker, bolt cutters in hand. She handed something to one of the men, gestured dramatically toward the structure, and walked around shining a flashlight like she was a crime scene investigator. They didn't realize the cameras were infrared, with clear audio. By 6 a.m., I had already downloaded the footage, time-stamped it, and sent copies to my lawyer, the county sheriff's office, and the local news desk I'd been quietly feeding since this started. At 7:30, I drove to the site. A condemned sticker flapped in the breeze, slapped across my breaker box. Chains were wrapped around my main gate, padlocked from the inside. I took photos, called the sheriff, and waited. The responding deputy was someone new. She took one look at the sticker and said, "This isn't official." Then she walked up, snapped pictures of the seal, and radioed in for confirmation. 10 minutes later, she turned to me and said, "There's no county record of this condemnation, and your site has no open violations." "I know," I said. "Check this out." I showed her the footage on my phone. Karen, in full HD, trespassing, vandalizing, and directing what was essentially a fake government inspection. The deputy's eyebrows nearly climbed off her face. "I'll need to make a full report," she said, voice tight. "This looks serious." "You think?" I said, deadpan. She cut the lock, cleared the site for entry, and advised me to document everything, which I was already 10 steps ahead on. By noon, my lawyer had filed an emergency injunction and submitted the video to the county prosecutor's office as part of an ongoing fraud case. Then came the next surprise. While reviewing the rest of the documents we'd pulled from the zoning office, we found 2 pending land sales for parcels adjacent to mine, submitted by none other than Sun Mesa Ridge HOA. But there was a problem. Those parcels weren't part of the HOA either. They belonged to 2 elderly siblings who'd inherited the land from their parents, but had never built on it. Quiet folks didn't pay much attention to paperwork. Karen had listed the parcels as pending community acquisition, claiming they were voluntarily being brought into the HOA by family agreement. We contacted the owners. They were stunned, had no idea their land had been offered for sale, or that any association claimed control over it. Within 24 hours, they filed their own fraud reports and agreed to make formal statements supporting my case. It was no longer just a harassment campaign, it was a pattern, a deliberate land grab disguised as bureaucracy, one fraudulent document at a time. That night, I sat in my trailer with the footage looping on a second monitor, documents spread out in organized piles, and my security system humming quietly around me. The air outside smelled like dust and heat. Somewhere, a dog barked once and went silent. Karen had crossed a line, and now the paper trail she built to trap me was starting to wrap around her own neck. By sunrise, the footage had already made its way up the county food chain. At 8:03 a.m., I got a call from a woman named Dana Kessler, senior investigator with the Maricopa County Attorney's Office. Her voice was clipped, no nonsense, and sharp enough to slice drywall. "Mr. Miller," she said, "I've reviewed the files your attorney submitted. I'd like to meet in person today. Are you available?" "I've got nothing but time, Dana." She met me in a conference room on the 4th floor of the county complex, a binder already open in front of her. Inside, freeze frames of Karen cutting the power, the phony condemnation sticker, the fraudulent annexation forms, and the zoning amendment request, all marked, indexed, and flagged with yellow tabs. "We've been watching Sun Mesa Ridge for a while," Dana said. "But this is a gift. You just lit the fuse." Apparently, Karen and her board had a long trail of gray zone behavior. Minor fines here, shady contractor payments there, but nothing ever stuck. Complaints got buried, mysteriously vanished, or were resolved internally. But now, between the doctored documents, the impersonation of government authority, and trespassing, it was enough to initiate a formal inquiry. A real one. By 11 a.m., Dana had dispatched 2 process servers to Sun Mesa Ridge's clubhouse with subpoenas. Another 2 went to the planning office to pull communication logs and staff access records. And then, because God has a sense of humor, the county sent a full inspection team to my site, only this time to verify the absence of violations and document the tampering done by the fake inspectors. I stood with arms folded as 4 county officials took pictures of the chains Karen's team had welded onto my main gate and the gouged-out cable channel where they'd jammed a lock. One of the inspectors, a big guy with a sunburned nose, shook his head. "They used a county-issued sticker," he said. "That's impersonation of a public official. It's a felony." "Yeah," I said. "Tell Karen." But Karen wasn't answering the door that day. By mid-afternoon, she'd locked down the HOA office, unplugged the phone, and told residents she was taking a leave of absence for mental health. Her second-in-command, a man named Alan McCready, started replying to emails. His first message, a smug, vague press statement about protecting the aesthetic harmony of Sun Mesa Ridge. That lasted 6 hours before he got served too. Meanwhile, I was done playing defense. My lawyer filed a civil claim for damages, citing loss of work, defamation, trespass, destruction of property, and emotional distress. We requested an emergency court hearing to issue a cease and desist against the HOA, plus a preliminary injunction to freeze their authority over any zoning actions until the investigation concluded. That night, a neighbor I hadn't met before, middle-aged guy in a faded U.S. Navy hat, knocked on the frame of my trailer. "I'm Mike. I live over that ridge," he said, pointing toward the southern slope. "Just wanted to say, good for you. Karen tried to get me kicked out 6 years ago for putting up a flagpole." I laughed. "Let me guess. Unauthorized vertical structures." "Exactly. I didn't have your guts, though. I caved. Took it down. We talked for an hour. Then another neighbor drove up. Then a third. Within 2 days, I had a dozen locals swinging by the site, shaking my hand, telling their own Karen horror stories. I realized something. I wasn't just building a house anymore. I was exposing a rot that had spread far beyond my fence line. By Friday, the local Fox affiliate ran a story. HOA under investigation after homeowner reveals forged documents and illegal raids. They used a blurred version of my footage and a shot of the sticker on my breaker panel. I didn't give interviews, not yet, but I let the story breathe. And it spread. My inbox exploded. Former residents, angry ex-board members, even one former HOA treasurer. They sent me emails, scanned letters, meeting notes. One guy uploaded a trove of PDF files from old board meetings where Karen approved informal enforcement actions and annexation efforts. Half of it looked insane, but all of it was real. Karen had been playing Empire Builder for years, slowly swallowing neighboring parcels, forging buffer zone claims, misusing zoning tools like monopoly pieces. My lot just happened to be where she pushed one square too far, and now the government had her in its sights. I was midway through building a support frame for my new solar inverter when I heard tires crunch on gravel, slow, deliberate, and very much unwanted. I looked up, expecting another curious neighbor, or maybe a friendly reporter. Instead, it was 2 men in blue button-ups with laminated badges swinging from their necks. Behind them, an older model pickup idled, its doors stenciled with Planning and Compliance, Special Enforcement Unit. One of them stepped forward, adjusting his sunglasses like he was about to deliver a sermon. "Mr. Miller?" "Yep. We're here regarding your recent zoning adjustments. We've received a complaint regarding possible environmental code violations on your parcel." I let out a breath and leaned back against the post. "Let me guess. Chemical runoff? Erosion? Groundwater contamination?" The second guy flipped through his clipboard. Yes, actually. All of the above." I didn't move, just reached behind me and pulled a folded envelope from the back pocket of my jeans, notarized reports from my soil tests, water quality lab results, and a certified environmental compliance letter from the county, dated 2 weeks prior. I handed it over. They read in silence. Then one cleared his throat. "Well, these appear to be in order. Do you mind if we take a quick walk around the site?" "Be my guest," I said, "but just so you know, I'm recording. Nothing personal." As they wandered the property, I texted Dana Kessler. "HOA sent fake Enviro complaint. 2 guys here now. Looks like another false call. Want footage?" She replied in under a minute. "Absolutely. Get badge numbers if possible." After 20 minutes and a whole lot of nothing, the men left, but not before I got them both on camera admitting there was no active violation. Dana filed their visit as evidence of ongoing harassment through misused regulatory channels. Meanwhile, things inside Sun Mesa Ridge were boiling over. Residents began holding impromptu meetings, not at the HOA office, which was now padlocked, but in living rooms, driveways, even a church hall. Word got out that Karen had been operating the HOA budget through a private account. Alan, her vice president, had been signing off on expenditures for community enhancement projects that included a $4,000 espresso machine and a membership at a private golf club. And the best part? Karen had been using HOA funds to pay a local contractor, not for community landscaping, but for surveillance work, hidden cameras aimed at my parcel. One neighbor found a motion-activated unit nailed to a Palo Verde tree at the border of his lot, pointed directly at my driveway. It didn't take long for someone to call the sheriff. Deputies swept through the HOA office with a warrant the next day. I heard about it from Mike, the Navy vet, who texted me a blurry photo of deputies carrying out boxes marked Financials 2022 and Member Files. That same afternoon, the county clerk officially froze Sun Mesa Ridge's legal ability to issue fines, enforce covenants, or process new member dues. Karen vanished. Nobody had seen her in days. Her car sat idle in her driveway, a thin layer of dust gathering on the windshield. Some residents speculated she'd skipped town. Others swore they saw her jogging at night, hoodie up, avoiding contact. As for me, I took a new approach. I had a metal sign custom-made. Private property, not part of any HOA. Trespassers will be prosecuted, and mounted it on a 10-foot post at the entrance. Below it, I added a trail cam, motion-activated HD with night vision, and then I installed 3 more around the perimeter. No more surprises, but just when I thought Karen had finally slithered away, a certified letter arrived. Inside, a cease and desist order, not from the HOA, but from a third-party law firm, claiming I had defamed their client, Karen West, and incited public unrest that endangered her personal safety. They demanded I take down all recordings, remove any signage referencing the HOA, and cease all communication with current or former Sun Mesa Ridge members. I laughed so hard I choked on my coffee. My lawyer sent them a reply in 30 minutes flat. It included a full timeline of events, documentation of their client's felonies, and a warning. Any further attempt to intimidate our client will result in additional civil action. Please direct all future correspondence to the county prosecutor's office. And with that, the 6th wave passed, but I could feel the next one building already. It didn't take long after the sheriff's sweep of the HOA office for everything to snowball. Reporters started calling. Local news vans idled outside Sun Mesa Ridge like vultures circling a downed cow. My neighbor Mike sent me a link. Headline read, HOA under investigation for forgery, harassment, and embezzlement. I was mentioned by name, but Karen wasn't hiding anymore. She came back swinging, literally. One morning, I found my front gate sealed shut with a giant red sticker. Do not enter, subject to county order. Except the order number was fake. The seal was fake. And the padlock, brand new. I pulled out my grinder, cut it open, and walked straight to the sheriff's substation with the footage. An hour later, a deputy showed up with a real warrant, this time to seize HOA files from Karen's house. They knocked, no answer. Then boom, a side door opened, and Karen came out screaming that she was being targeted by domestic terrorists. She was cuffed before she could finish the sentence. I stood behind my mailbox and sipped my coffee while they walked her to the cruiser. Inside her home, deputies found a lot. Pre-filled HOA violation slips with my name on them, maps showing fake expanded HOA boundaries, and a flash drive labeled building freeze plans. It had correspondence between her and a corrupt inspector, including payment records. The county prosecutor called me that evening. Mr. Miller, we're opening a formal case. We'd like to request full copies of your video footage, including timestamps and device logs. We'll subpoena the inspector separately. Finally, it was real. It wasn't just me fighting shadows. I didn't celebrate. I sent the files, updated my trail cams, and installed motion sensor lights. There was still cleanup ahead, but I knew one thing. Karen had finally stepped on the wrong man's land. The court hearing took place exactly 67 days after Karen was cuffed on her own driveway. The media dubbed it the HOA Harpy case. I didn't come for the nickname. I came for closure. Inside the Maricopa County courtroom, Karen looked nothing like the storm in heels I remembered. She was in a beige suit, hair pulled back so tight it looked painful, flanked by 2 lawyers who looked like they were already regretting their fees. The judge, a silver-haired woman with no patience for theatrics, opened with the HOA's forged documents. My footage played on the screen. There was Karen cutting the lock. There she was, shoving a sticker on my gate. There was her HOA van parked on my property line like it owned the dirt. Then came the emails, scanned, printed, verified, payments to inspectors, backdated violation slips. A memo titled "Make Him Quit." Her lawyers tried to blame internal miscommunication. The judge raised an eyebrow so high it could have broken glass. I testified with receipts, literally, county zoning approvals, building permits, deed history, a notarized affidavit from my land surveyor. By the time I finished, even the bailiff looked impressed. Karen didn't speak a word. In the end, the judge's ruling was brutal and beautiful. Karen was found guilty on 6 counts: criminal trespass, falsification of public records, harassment, obstruction, conspiracy, and fraud. She was sentenced to 2 years probation, 500 hours of community service, and banned from holding any HOA position for life. But that wasn't all. The HOA itself was dissolved. The judge called it a rogue body masquerading as governance. A special master was appointed to return any improperly collected fines to residents. I was awarded damages, $480,000 for legal costs, property damage, emotional distress, and the delay to my construction. Karen was liable for most of it. I walked out of court lighter than I'd felt in years. 2 months later, my house was finished, clean, strong, and finally mine in peace. On the front gate, I mounted a new sign, just a little brass plate, simple and direct, private property, not part of any HOA. Trespassers will be prosecuted. Below that, etched smaller, just ask Karen.